Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Todd Rotundo. I'm the counselor for Ward 1. This is another meeting in continuance to the first one we had up here with a lot of concerns about the Bass River Overlay District. Some of you came to the Ward 2 Civic Association meeting at City Hall. Thank you for both meetings. We did change the format up a little differently tonight. We kind of followed a little bit what the Ward 2 Civic Association did. We're going to do a 3-minute limit to keep it moving, the conversation moving. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns you want to state, there's a podium over there with the microphone underneath. You need to turn the switch on and try to keep the microphone to your mouth. As well as be aware that I will be holding a time and I'll put my hand up to let you know that your time is up just so you can finish up your thought. I want to thank the Ryal Civic Association for actually hosting this meeting tonight, the Air School and the staff for allowing us here tonight. Kim Allen from BevCam coming here to record it. It will be viewed on Channel 99 and on YouTube tomorrow. He'll have a link. And Eric Gagnon from the Civic Association will get that out on the Facebook pages as well as the association's website. I want to thank the mayor for being here, as well as Darlene Nguyen, who's the planning director. And I'm going to stop speaking at this point. I'm going to give the microphone over to Eric. I know he wants to have a few words. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Todd. I'm not going to talk as much as last time. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and for being involved. It's been a long month. And so with the Civic Association, we put a committee together of people that were on both sides of the spectrum. And I want to thank them because they've been putting a lot of time in, at least a couple hours a week since the last meeting, doing research and going over the survey results that you guys gave us. So George Gomes, wanted to thank him, Heather Boya, Stephen Moffett, Pat Henneberry, somewhere in here, Paul Case, who couldn't be here tonight, and Chris Wilcock, who couldn't be here tonight. I want to thank the mayor and the city for meeting with us. We met with him last night to go over our findings, and we look forward to working with them to come up with a responsible plan that would be down there. And also thank you to Councilor Rotundo for always keeping us in the loop and working with us on this. Right now, Stephen Moffett just wanted to have a couple words, and then we'll give everyone else the floor.
Thanks. Yeah, so just background on the committee. So the committee was composed of members whose preferences represented the variety of views on this issue. So we want to thank all the association members who engaged in the survey and continued to fill out those perspectives. We've worked since then to follow up and dig into those concerns and raise those, and tried to continue with that conversation in email. And we've had conversations with many of you, and we wanted to thank the city for their time and effort in working with us to understand those concerns and describe how they're working to fulfill those in the overlay project as that proposal is being continuously evolving. So many of the questions and concerns have been already addressed, and frequently asked questions section's been added to the overlay website. Links to that site have been shared on the Ryal Facebook page and in an email to members, so we encourage you to read through that if you haven't already. And thank you all for coming, and we look forward to continuing the discussion tonight.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all again. Want to do a couple of, maybe just one. I'm looking around. City Councilor at Large Brendan Sweeney is able to be here with us tonight. Councilor, thank you. And obviously your own Councilor Todd Rotundo, your own Ward 1 Councilman. Oh, okay, good. So we thought I'd speak briefly to try to help kind of put some context to where things are at. Those of you who either went to the Ward 2 meeting recently or read about it heard me say that we decided not to try to put anything forward to the council and the planning board this spring. It needs more work. I really appreciate the conversations we've had. So the earliest we would put something forward would be the fall, and it won't surprise you. What we really want to do is work with you as a neighborhood group, work with our Goat Hill and other Ward 2 downtown neighbors, and try to get this right. So you understand that we're trying to address housing broadly. We're also trying to address affordable housing, and I think we all agree that we want there to be more real affordable in any development that might happen down there. And so that's one. We want to make sure that there's meaningful open space, back from the river, at least 50 feet, hopefully more, that is, kept up and for all our enjoyment. We want to see some commercial down there. We want to see, we got to tick those up. And then we also need to see that any construction that happens down there is done in a manner that doesn't add to our greenhouse gas emissions. We've got targets as a community we've got to meet. And so those kind of things, when you take them all together, they add cost to anybody trying to develop down there. So we recognize that 1,000 units is too many. We're going to need to come in south of that. I know everybody here's got their own opinion on just what's the right number. And so trying to find that combination of factors and kind of lay them all in together so that, we ultimately put new words on a page in terms of an overlay or zoning change that has something happen down there that's productive and positive. So I'm going to be done in a minute, then you folks
But I
can.
have a question before that.
Okay.
In your hand, what does down there mean?
Down, oh, you mean in terms of a number of unit count?
Well, down there, what do you think when you say down there?
Oh, what did I just say? Help me remember.
Down there, I mean down there.
I guess down at the bottom of the hill, from where we are.
At the bottom of the hill.
Say it again?
The Bass River.
Yeah, the Bass River waterfront.
Bass River.
Down.
One side. Bass River.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. This potential overlay is along the side just behind the depot train station only. Okay? And it would be up, it potentially be up through the Bolomat property.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for that confusion. So anyway, we're trying to find that formula. We really want to work with you to find it. As I said, when we believe we're ready to go forward, there won't be surprises in that we'll have been working it all with you. And, it'd be great if we can reach a point that there's a kind of broad support for doing something and what it looks like. We'll see if we get there. But I want you to understand that we're in the process now. We had said we wanted to try to go forward this spring. Clearly, that's the wrong timeline. We've got work to do with you all. All right? Thank you.
So we're going to start it right into questions. And just to give everyone, we're going to make it a hard 8:30 start. So I'm going to go grab the book, and then as I call your name up, go right up to the microphone. Introduce yourself for us, please, and then speak your question, and either Mayor Cahill or Darlene will answer to the best for you guys, okay?
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah, sure. George Gomes, 63 Bridge Street, Unit 2. I have a comment and a question. First, I was part of the Civic Association committee, and I want to thank Eric for reaching out to me because I think I'm definitely on the more pro-development side of the equation. So I do appreciate that the Civic Association has tried to take in a range of opinions on this issue. I think a lot of people are reflexively against changes to their built environment, and I completely understand that. I also think that a lot of people who own and have been in the community for a very long time are maybe not appreciative of some of the challenges that people who live in Beverly, who want to remain in Beverly, who grew up in Beverly, and want to live and make a life here are facing. So I think there is a little bit of a sort of opinion that these apartments are not for us in some way. They're for other people. First of all, I think it's a good thing that people want to live in our community. It means we have a good community, and we should welcome that. And I think it's sort of a necessity. Like, places change over time. The city's been here for 400 years, and if we froze it in time at 1626, none of us would be here today. So I just kind of want to put that forward as a thought for people, that these buildings may not be lived in by any of the people in this room, but maybe your children, maybe your grandkids, maybe your cousins might be the people who are there. So that's my personal opinion. Like I said, I appreciate that Eric let me kind of share that with the Civic Association Committee and now with all of you. I did have a question on affordability, and this is for Darlene because it's a little bit technical. I think a lot of people are confused on what we mean when we have affordability targets. There is an inclusionary zoning ordinance for the city, and there's some confusion as to what that means. We have this area median income target, and then various percentages of that, and I apologize, we have baby's first public meeting here. So I'm hoping, Darlene, you can clear that up, and I know it's a confusing issue. So I think this is probably going to be one for the FAQ to get in a little more detail, but whatever you can do to clear that up would be really appreciated.
Sure. This question was staged, so George gave me a little time to prepare on this one, but it did want to help kind of bring it down into what we mean when we talk about affordable housing. There's a variety of different types of affordable housing in the city. There's the traditional public housing that the Beverly Housing Authority manages. There's low-income housing that places like Harbor Lake Community Partners or the YMCA build, where their projects tend to be 100% affordable, and they're financed with local, state, and federal funds and heavily financed in order to offset the costs. And we have a couple great projects, the Cabot YMCA renovation and rehab, the Anchor Point that's being built. Those are a couple of examples of those projects, which are usually targeted to people who earn below 60%, sometimes 50% of the area median income, often 30%, which would be considered extremely low income. And then the type of affordable housing we're talking about here, which would be inclusionary units or units that are included in a private project, a market rate project. And our inclusionary zoning ordinance requires that private developers include a set percentage of that housing in their projects. And so for context, so I wanted to give you some numbers. So it's based on area median income. It's a federal standard that's set up by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And the area median income, our area is called the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy metro area. So we're not talking about Beverly's median income. We're talking about the median, which is equivalent of average, of that entire area. It includes New Hampshire, it goes down to Quincy. It's a really large area, and I think you can safely understand that it's skewed higher than if we were just using the Beverly area, because we're including Boston and Cambridge and some of the more wealthier communities in the Metro West and around Boston. So, and then, so for a family of four, the area median income number that we use is $101,000. So I think that's probably a lot higher than people are imagining. So for some examples, so we require right now that a developer would include 12% of their units at 80% area median income, which is, the 80% is 101,000, sorry. And then so then they could also do 8% of their units at 60% of area median income. And 60% of area median income is about $75,000 for a family of four. So for a couple examples, so you have a one-bedroom unit in a new apartment, one person moving in, they make 60% of the area median income, which means they earn about $56,000 a year, and they'd be paying about $1,500 in rent for a one-bedroom unit. A person making 80% of the area median income earns about $70,000 per year. This is, again, a one-bedroom, one person, and they'd be paying about $1,900 in rent for a one-bedroom unit. So the number of people living in the unit and the number of bedrooms also influences the price. But those are just a couple of examples. Wanted to give you those numbers so you know what we're talking about here. These are our teachers, our government employees, our restaurant workers. When we're talking about affordable housing, these are the people in the community who serve us, who are in this room, who work with us in many ways. Did that answer your question, George?
More or less, I think I think there had been some question about whether we're remaining at the 8, whether the goal was to go to 12 to increase the lower threshold, the 60%, which is something we kind of discussed.
Yeah. The mayor has said, I think in prior meetings, that we're looking to get more affordability citywide. So whether that means this overlay district would have a higher rate, a higher percentage of units required to be affordable at the 60% level, or whether that's a change that we make citywide. that's something we're actively talking about and a direction that we want to go into.
Thank you, Darlene. Karen, is it Stahl? Thank you. Again, if you go to speak to the microphone, just, even if you leave and you decide to ask another question or someone wants to speak, can you just go to the microphone this way? It will pick up on BevCam and you won't be muted on the cable TV for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Karen Stahl. I live in Ward 4, and I'm a lifelong resident of Beverly. And I have a sort of a future question for the city government. You've done a tremendous amount of building, and I'm all for affordable housing. I was a teacher. I didn't make a big amount of money. However, what I want to know is, when do you cap it? When do you say, we've built enough? Residents have a right to have some sort of quality of life without the amount of traffic. And I know everybody's saying, well, there's only one car, but if you have 2 bedrooms, you know, you have, some of us remember roommates. Anyways, it could be 2 cars. People want to gather, they want to have their friends over. Where do those people park? And I was just around town today, and the lines of traffic are just getting longer and longer. And I want to question, what's the ultimate plan? I know there's more plans for apartments at the old Subway restaurant, maybe bidding more down on Rantoul Street by the bridge. When do we say enough is enough?
We have a master plan that we together as a community wrote over a couple of year period, and it was finished off just about before COVID hit. And so I'd invite you to take a look at that. It's on the city website. The question you ask it's a big question, right? There's not one easy or quick answer. So we have zoning all over the city. Zoning allows things by right. And so the zoning, I'll give you a couple of values we've had. One is, there was a lot more green space in the city 25 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. We are trying to ensure that in our master plan, where housing will be built and where business development will happen is in, as often as possible, in places that are already developed, meaning there'll be redevelopment on sites that are not green. And we're trying to do everything we can to prevent green from being lost. You know, there's still a good amount of open space in Beverly. A lot of it that we might think is protected is not, right? It's still potentially developable, and we're trying to act on those, you know, on those opportunities to protect land as well. So that's one piece of it. There are no plans to say nobody can build another unit of housing in Beverly. Okay, one of the things that I think, in fairness, we all have shared as a value at one time or another, and hopefully still, is that Beverly has always been a place that somebody can discover and fall in love with and choose to make a life in. So, you know, that's a part of the challenge as we look at housing. I understand, and I also am sensitive to the concerns around traffic, and that's a part of why we're slowing down this process and trying to work through with you. And maybe anticipating a future question, and one that we talked about last night, we are looking at doing some traffic study work specific to different scenarios that might take place down along the Bass River waterfront before moving further. Again, I'm not sure if my answer is satisfactory to you as you phrased it. Do you want to follow up, or is that helpful?
It is. You talk about open space. There's not a whole lot of open space available to the residents. And I understand you're getting, you know, smart lights. I think there are 19 smart lights up by homes. It doesn't change the fact that you've got increasingly a number of vehicles. And we all want a certain, I mean, when you want to go for a walk along Lothrop Beach, along Lothrop, even in the summertime, forget it. But even in this time of year, maybe you can get a parking space, maybe not. I've been walking the cemeteries. Plenty of parking there. But, you know.
Yeah?
Nobody bothers you there. I just look at the quality of life for people who have spent a lifetime or many years or maybe a good time for, as you add more and more people, things aren't as great. And Beverly has always been a really great city.
So, good points, and let's have a longer conversation about that. I would say that even as I just said, we don't have as much open space as we used to. We have a lot of open space in Beverly. There are a lot of places people can enjoy. People can walk along Lothrop Street. You can find a parking space there. Maybe not, your first run through at a given point in time. You mentioned the cemeteries. Yeah, they're really a peaceful place to walk. I know a lot of people teach their kids to ride a bike in the cemeteries. I was out in the Beverly Commons woods earlier, late afternoon today, and there's a lot out there to enjoy for sure. Just a touchstone on population. Our population in the 1970 census, which I'll double check for complete accuracy, but it was around 40,000. Our population in this census 50 years later is about 42,000. So, yes, we have a lot more housing units than 50 years ago. The household sizes are smaller. Right? That's a reality of family sizes and household sizes. The housing is needed. The number of cars is greater, right? There are a lot of projections that the number of cars are going down, not yet, but eventually we will have a modernization of our train line. I don't know how quickly it'll happen. It was, well, she just said not in my lifetime. I hope, my Lord, I served on the governor's rail visioning committee 3-4 years ago that looked at the future of the commuter rail. We don't want to call it that. It's really a regional rail system. And the recommendations that came out of that process were for full electrification and full station rebuild throughout the system. Now, it's 400 miles of train line. It's a lot. Wouldn't happen overnight, but the MBTA's Fiscal Management Control Board endorsed the plan and then endorsed a phase 1, which would electrify the Fairmont line, goes out through Dorchester, would electrify the Providence line, which is already partly electrified, and would electrify our line up through the Beverly Depot. Now, that looked like it was on about a 5-year track until COVID hit. So, but it's still going to happen. Maybe it's clearly not as quickly. But as we look ahead, and it's not today or in 2 years from now, but as we look ahead some way, there's going to need to be, in this region and throughout this country, a much more robust public transit set of options. And that train line is one, and a whole lot of connectors off that train line, bus and ride share and other more micro-mobility like bikes and scooters and walking, safe walking routes and all of that. It's all going to be part of our landscape eventually. And with all that said, yes, I'm sensitive to traffic too. And that's a part of what we're going to work through together here. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric Gagnon.
This gentleman can go easy.
So just state your name and ask your question. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
I'm incompetent. How many cars per person do you expect?
We've done 3 studies in the last, 5-6 years of the newer buildings down along Rantoul, and they've come out consistently below 1 car per unit. The most recent one came out just at the 1 car, 1.03 cars per unit. We have learned some things from activity over the last several years, and whatever comes forward here, one of the things we're going to really work hard to do is make sure that all the parking that's needed must be provided on the property, and we're going to try to take the type of steps in the ordinance to ensure that that's the number of cars that come and no more. And that's, as I said, we've learned some things from the last several projects, and so trying to put that in place. One of the things that we deal with, the people that you entrust with making these policy decisions is you ultimately got to get words on a page that are going to work every time. It's a challenge, but that's the goal is one per unit, and then enough for the commercial needs and enough for visitors, et cetera.
Thank you. Heidi? Eric, well, I'm sorry, I thought you were giving up your spot. I apologize. My apologies, Eric. I thought you were giving your spot up to him.
All right, I just want to make it clear I'm speaking for myself and my family and not on behalf of the Civic Association. So I did want to address a comment that was made earlier, and I know George didn't mean it this way, but I know Ryal side prides itself in being the community and a welcoming community. Out of the hundreds of people I've talked to about this issue, not one person are afraid of the people that are going to come. What the issue is the city and the region is not prepared with its infrastructure for that influx of people. The concern is the traffic down there in that specific area and the outlying areas, specifically 62 or Bridge Street going to 128. Today it took me 15 minutes to get from Bridge at 62 to 128, another 15 minutes to get from 62 to Liberty Tree Mall because of the traffic. And that's current conditions. And now we're gonna add another, who knows, under 1,000, 900, 700, whatever number down here, without knowing how that's gonna affect the traffic. I know, and I thank you for last night committing to doing a traffic study of that area so we can see how it would affect. That has been one of the biggest concerns. The infrastructure cannot handle it, or the city services, or the supporting services. I know at the Ward 2 meeting, someone brought up, a couple nurses brought up the fact about the hospital not being able to possibly handle influx of population. And I started thinking about that, and in the past 2 years, I mean, I think everybody has seen how the hospitals were affected and couldn't handle what we had going on the last 2 years. And then we had Lynn Hospital close, Salem's overflowing into Beverly, and now we're gonna add more people. So that's a concern of mine, the hospital. My question is another question, and you can answer at the end, Mayor, with these. Is there any pressure on other towns taking some of this burden? Hamilton, Wenham, Manchester, Topsfield, with all this open space, and all they're building is single families. And also, I'll say that to the rest of Beverly also. I don't see these buildings going in Montserrat, where you live. I don't see these buildings going in North Beverly. I don't see them going in Centerville, the Farms. All I see is single family developments going. Not affordable, single family, where there's all this empty space. Right on Bridge Street, there's a lot of industrial areas. Not Bridge Street, sorry, Brimble Ave. A lot of industrial areas not even being looked at for zoning or that we've heard of, right on 128. We know a lot of people are driving, hence all the traffic. I know we want to talk about the train, but we just don't see it. Also wanted to address we keep talking about the developers making money and them needing to make money or they're not going to build there, and that's why we have to allow so much development. It's all relative. The property's not going to be worth more than what they can put on it. And a prime example, which I think is beautiful development, is down on Congress Street. I don't know if anyone's seen that right on the water, or the old, sorry, I forget the name of the factory where they built the atom bomb there. Thank you. They managed to clean up the nuclear site there and build something nice and still make money on it. And I don't understand why we can't put that down there with that same type of density. That would be well within the 500 unit number rather than 1,000. And then the other one, and it keeps being brought up about the bowler mat. They spent this much money. They're not going to lose $5 million. They're not going to just not build something there. They're going to put something and make something nice. And I hope we can work together to make something responsible down there, something nice down there, with some commercial space that we can enjoy. If we're going to take the burden of this, I would hope that we're going to get some benefit out of it. And that would be some nice spots, some restaurants, some cafes. And I would also ask if the city would maybe purchase a piece of the property that would make a nice spot down there like Newburyport, where they can maybe have bands on the water. Is the city considering that at all?
So, okay, there's a lot there, Eric, let me try to, no,
Mainly the other communities, the other parts of Beverly,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe a pocket.
Yeah, let me start with the potential for owning some land down there that we don't own. As we look at how to approach this acreage and these number of parcels, and we're trying to find a formula that brings not too many units of new housing together with the access and the affordability and the rest. One way to do that would be to allow less density on each parcel and look at the parcels under consideration and put them all forward. I don't know, and that's a part of what we're trying to find. We had a great conversation about this last night, which has us wanting to look into some more things. You know, Pat, you and Eric and I and Councilor and Darlene, you know, that was a really good conversation on that point. So one thing that we don't want to do is restrict density so much that nothing will be built, and that's kind of a, you know, how do you calculate that? Another way to do this would be take some of the acreage out of the conversation and don't include it in an overlay, and allow sufficient density on the acreage that we do include, so that all the things can happen on a given parcel that we're looking for. And that could lead to us trying to buy a parcel. I could see us doing it. I mean, it doesn't just happen because we want to. We'd have to identify the money as one, and we'd have to find a willing partner to sell. I'm interested in that, for sure. And that would be in addition to the land that would be made publicly available by anyone who might develop on a given parcel, right? That's separate. So could we own a parcel down there? Possibly. Willing to try to figure that one out and see if it can work. The other communities and the other parts of Beverly, yes, right? I mean, we can't control what's going on in some of the other communities. Emily Hutchings is going to talk in a minute and talk about the new law that the state passed. It's going to require all MBTA communities to have housing plans and hopefully, you know, lead to production in some of those other communities. As far as other neighborhoods in Beverly, we know that the depot has twice as many trains as the other stations further up the line because the line splits. So I can see transit-oriented development near the other stations. And it's really, in a lot of ways, it's a timing thing, because the transit is so infrequent up the line, being half of what it is at the depot, that we would not want to miscalculate. For example, work to promote a redevelopment of a parcel by another train station, have people move in there thinking they'd take the train to go in and out of work, only to find out that there are twice as many trains at the depot, so they instead get in their car every day and drive to the depot from another, you know, neighborhood station. That's a calculus we're trying to work on. So some of it's timing and making sure that transit supports what might happen around it. Let me ask Emily to talk about the other communities and what hopefully is going to start happening. Yeah, go ahead.
First, on the parcel down there, I will say that the Civic Association would 100% help for the CPC funds and whatever we could to help get that down there, like we did with Livingston Park. I know that we didn't purchase Livingston Park, but I know CPC funds are there, and we would do everything to help with that project. And to the transit, I'm that's another thing I'm tired of hearing about, because we don't see people taking the trains, but we'll leave it at that. Go ahead, Emily.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Hutchings. I'm the Assistant Planning Director. So I do want to take a minute to talk about the MBTA Communities Act. The state legislature passed this act last year, and it requires cities and towns that have either MBTA stations in them or are adjacent to communities with MBTA stations to zone for additional development. They are required to zone for a specific density. They have to create these zones around train stations. They have to be within a half a mile. The Department of Housing and Community Development is in the process of developing guidelines to help communities figure out exactly what this means for each of them, but effectively it means that every single community that has a train station, that has a bus line, a bus station, a bus stop in it, will have to create these zones or risks being unable to apply for significant state funding that is currently available to them. So yes, these other communities are being required to do their share. There are a lot of communities that are concerned about infrastructure. They say, well, we don't have the water, we don't have the roads. That's something that we have to look into and plan for, especially as we have these train stations and we're looking at where development should go rationally and where it could go. So I hope that answers your questions. We did provide a presentation to the City Council at their last meeting. That is posted on BevCam. The presentation is available. Please feel free to reach out to the Planning Department if you have any additional questions.
Emily, I just have a quick question.
Yep.
On that, is Beverly, have they already satisfied, have we satisfied our number within what that new legislation? Are we within that range already, or do we need to build more?
That's a good question. We're not sure yet. We think so that we satisfied.
So we think that we've satisfied it already.
Let me put a caveat on that. We will not know until DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, finishes their guidelines. They're in draft form right now. As they are right now, and they are liable to change, we think that our central commercial zoning district, our CC zone, satisfies that. And we have submitted this information to the state. We will know later this year once the guidelines have been finalized. So this would not be something that we would have to do to come into compliance, but it makes sense. It's a reasonable place to put this type of development.
Thank you. So it seems like we've done our part, or very close to doing our part, that the state feels that each city should do.
Beverly is doing pretty well, I think, especially compared to some of the other communities that are out there. Any other questions on the MBTA Communities Act while I'm up here? Okay.
Thank you, Emily. Heidi Bissell, you're next.
Hi, I'm Heidi Bissell. I live on Ashton Street. I know somebody else already kind of talked about what I wanted to say, but I do feel like now people need to feel like they're being listened to with all these meetings that we've been going to. It sounds like going from 1,700 to 1,000 to even less than 1,000. I think maybe we are starting to feel that way, because I think in the past, and I've heard from so many other people that, you know, we can go to all the meetings we want. They're going to do what they want. But I'm feeling a little bit better about that. But I feel like this other woman talked about, that being an elected official, that you should be really trying hard to make your city residents happy and really work with us instead of trying to appease the builders who are just trying to make a buck and don't care one way or the other of the chaos that will occur, because we know the chaos does occur, and that's what everybody's afraid of. And we as Beverly residents hope that you feel what we feel, truly feel, that people feel like they're being listened to. I'm not opposed to housing. I'm not opposed to change or building. But gosh, we have enough of just packing us in. I know that there's plans on doing things down at Gloucester Crossing, you know, that craziness. And I know Don Preston had a really good, his numbers were good, as opposed to, I know Darlene spoke of that, not being grouped in with Boston and all those, higher income communities, that we should be going with our own community, because that's what this is. This is our community. And we're feeling the chaos. Like I said, the builders go in, they do their thing, they make a buck, and they're out of here. We really need to be working with us residents. That's all.
Heidi, was there a question in that, or was it just more of a statement of your concerns? No, I just want to make sure there wasn't something that he missed. Thank you, Heidi. Chris Swords? Pass? Okay, thank you. Linda, is it Tylis or Tillis? Tillis, thank you. Sorry. We need it for the, just so that, we need the microphone so that we can hear it on BevCam, so we can hear your
Got
lovely
it.
voice. Perfect. Thank you.
I'll start this off on a positive note, and I personally want to thank the City of Beverly for helping to buy Marine Farm. I cannot tell you how much that means to me personally. I'm a member of the trustees of the reservation, and yes, go Beverly for that. I realize that this particular meeting was for the Bass River overlay. It seems that we have multiple apartment complexes in the works right now. I have one question to everyone here, including the mayor and the planning board. When is enough enough?
So two, you've both said the same thing. I would say that as we have a still unmet demand for housing, and as my neighbor is worried about her mom who lives in Connecticut and is trying to get her into housing in Beverly to be nearby to her, because that's the phase of life they're in together. And your neighbor, any given one of you, has kids who are trying to rent or buy their first home in Beverly as an adult. We still are in that space. So that's the tension, and I get it. But I just, I just need to say that piece of it. Any given one of us will find ourselves in that place, or already have, maybe don't right now, but that's a part of our reality too as a community.
Peter, I'm trying to read this. It's Peter, and I'm not sure if it's a K or an L, so. Wilworth, thank you. So it's not a K then. Nope, it's perfect.
I'm Pete Wilworth, Ward 2, and I have a statement, then a question. The recent International Panel on Climate Change states in no uncertain terms that in order to avoid catastrophic global warming and limit it to 2 degrees centigrade, fossil fuel emissions must peak by 2025 and decrease 25% by 2030. Our present route will lead to 3 degrees centigrade of warming, which is 5.4% Fahrenheit. That sounds a little worse, I think, which would be a total disaster. In light of that, it's a good thing that the administration is putting off a decision on the overlay district. Not a day goes by without more news about natural gas leaks, from extraction to combustion, and the devastating effect it's having on our environment. Methane, which natural gas is mostly made of, is over 80 times the greenhouse warming gas that CO2 is, although only for a couple decades as opposed to scores of decades for CO2. So natural gas leaks in our homes and the whiffs of methane from combustion have been found to be much more prevalent and dangerous health problems than the industry has let on. So here's the question. Is there any plan by our environmental award-winning mayor to find a way to ban new gas hookups in the overlay district or in the city as a whole? I know there are obstacles, but the obstacles will fall if the administration decides to embrace the idea of deep electric. Perhaps the mayor could contact Senator Lovely and apply for a home rule petition that would allow Beverly to decide whether natural gas hookups would be allowed, just like Lexington and Brookline have done, and just like New York City has done in many cities in California. So I'd like to know, Mr. Mayor, any plans along those lines?
Thank you, Pete. There is a lot there in that question, too. So just a couple thoughts. First, I didn't win an award. The city of Beverly actually, just this past fall, received a national award. The U.S. Conference of Mayors awards 2 cities nationally every year with the Climate City designation. And this past year was Houston, Texas, and Beverly, Massachusetts. And that's for a lot of great work that a lot of people in this community are doing on climate issues. So appreciate you bringing that up. Pete and I walked in from the parking lot together, and he said he had something for me. So this is it. Look, I mean, at a personal level, I'm with you. I would love to not allow any further gas hookups. I'm not sure that 100% that today in 2022 is where we're going to get to. We want net zero buildings built, i.e. we want them to be fully electric. Now, it doesn't mean they'll be net zero the day they're built because our power grid isn't 100% clean and renewable energy. But it's still, part of the current thinking around climate is just electrify fast and hard and let at the same time promote and support clean and renewable generation, and we'll get there. So yeah, I mean, we're talking about it. I'm happy to look at it specifically. We are hopeful that when the new state building code comes out later this year, early next calendar year, that the final version of that will have a very green community stretch code, which is what every green community, and there are about 200 in the state that are designated as such, would automatically be in. We're hoping as a city to go beyond that to a net zero requirement. So yeah, I mean, conceptually, yes, we're looking at the details to see how it works. There's another piece to this because there's a really, and I don't want to say, I'm still studying it. There's a real debate going on around how hard we lean into gas or run away from it, right? As we're trying to get our greenhouse gas emissions down and keep them down. One thing that we do in Beverly, and you see it, and it frustrates you at times because of the detours and the details, but we work with National Grid very closely to get them to replace gas lines and mains every time we're preparing to pave a road. And that's, they do more work in Beverly than in some communities, and that is replacing lines that leak with newer lines that are more, have better integrity, and so that cuts down on the gas leaks. So anyway, there's a lot to that, and I probably have forgotten one or two things I was going to say. Do you have a follow-up, Pete?
No, I just point out that the clock is ticking, and there is a need for natural gas right now. It's in that power plant over the Salem. There's no need for a huge grid of pipes going through all of our cities and towns with natural gas poisoning our residents. And it's something that should just be put into the past as soon as possible.
Yeah. So I think thanks, Pete. I think what you're talking about is extending lines where they aren't for new construction, right? Or connecting to new buildings. Yeah, because, a lot of us have our homes on gas at present, right? And so that network does exist.
You can't ban it in a house that exists.
Right, and we're not all going to get over to electric. Look, we're trying to take strong steps with our own buildings, and we're working hard in the private sector with buildings. We had a team of folks going out today to businesses around the community as part of a 3-day effort to get all of our business owners and landlords in the commercial sectors around Beverly to sit down with mass save teams and work on energy efficiency work and building system changes. So that, we're doing that. The police station we just built is, it's got a geothermal system. We were able to, that depends on the geotech and what you can do on a site. We're able to put in a geothermal system that'll do handle all the heating and cooling in the building. We also now are in the permitting process for solar on the roof and solar over the parking lot at that station, which will allow for a lot of behind-the-meter electric generation. So, and we're about to replace the HVAC system at the main branch library and looking to do geothermal there. So we are looking, everywhere we can, and what you raise is absolutely on point. The only other point I'll make is, read a book last year. We could read any number of books on environmental issues and on climate. One of the projections is that the building footprint on Earth, the square footage of buildings on Earth is going to double by 2060. Now, that's, even if that's partly true, and the expectation is that a lot of other countries are trying to live the standard of living that we've lived for a while, and there's just this push all over the world. So the idea being, we've got to take the existing building footprint in America, for example, and across the world, and drive down emissions, and we've got to account for a lot of new building footprint, including in our own communities, and those need to also be net zero. There's a lot there. We're working on it every day, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you. Greg Johnston. Remember, if you're asking a question, please use the microphone. If you have a follow-up or a comment, to try to use the microphone. It's the only way it'll get picked up on BevCam, so when you watch it in the future, you'll hear pauses of voids of no noise at all.
Hi, I'm a lousy public speaker, so bear with me. And I've been thinking about this proposal for a long time, and I've been going back and forth, both sides, yes, no. But maybe I should tell you a little bit of my history so you see where I'm coming from. I grew up over in Marblehead, and I don't see too many eyes rolling. And my family has forgiven me for coming over here, coming across the bridge. And mostly because we live in Ryal, which is an awesome neighborhood. And Beverly is too. My wife Joyce and I bought a house 30 years ago, and we fell in love with it. Fall in love with the neighborhood. We've made wonderful friends here and in the neighborhood and throughout Beverly. And our two grown daughters did very well through school and are doing very well on their own now. And Ryal really reminds me of the neighborhood I grew up 50 or 60 years ago. It was a place where we all as kids just had fun roaming around the neighborhood. And at that time, Marblehead wasn't full of rich folks. I grew up right across Salem Harbor from the Salem Power Plant. We had firefighters, police officers, lobstermen, salespersons, welders, carpenters, and custodians like my dad. And we did very well over there. Where this is going to is I studied architecture at Wentworth. I did 7 nights of school, night school, and came out with a bachelor in construction management. During my time I was studying at Wentworth, I was lucky enough to be a building inspector over Marblehead, and I saw how zoning impacts a town and how it can really affect the character of a town. And now I've worked 30 plus years in commercial construction. I'm an agent of chaos, as someone might have said earlier, and mostly in downtown Boston. So I've seen both sides of this whole issue. And I think someone said earlier that, nothing gets built unless it makes sense. The developers weigh how much money they can make, how much use they can put into the building, and they also look at what the minimum requirements are. And right now, housing is a very profitable, low-risk way of making money. And that's great. And I personally have no problem with building apartments down there, but I think we should really consider too, though, that it's not all going to be affordable housing. There's going to be market rate apartments there that folks are going to pay a lot of money to go in, buy their house, buy their apartment, and then they're going to look out and they're going to see the existing businesses down there. And they could start complaining about it. When I was a building inspector, one of my favorite complaints every year was a newcomer in town would complain about the lobsterman next door storing his boat and his pots. And that was a permitted use back then, accessory use to your residential, your house. But now, applying that to what we're doing here in Beverly, we should just really understand that you're doing a low overlay district. You're going to bring in people who are going to live there next to all these industrial uses. Has anybody talked to the property owners down there? Are they okay with this? I think we're going to find eventually they're going to sell all their properties to the highest bidder, and you're going to have, I don't know, I know you're planning on a certain amount of density down there, but is that being considered for every piece of property down there? And I just don't want to see Beverly turn into another Marblehead. If you go over there now, I was building inspector over there or assistant building inspector for back in the 80s when the building boom started. And the prices of the houses went through the roof. And development over there was more heavily residential than it was commercial. And you see what Marblehead is today. It's a lot of very expensive houses, very little commercial, very little, they don't have like a common center, they don't have, I'm going to say Monahan Lumber or all these places you see down the street. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're calling it an overlay district, but you really are changing it to a residential area. And we're going to lose these businesses that serve us. They need a lot of big area of land to work on, and there really isn't that much vacant land left on the North Shore where they could go to. And that's pretty much all I want to say.
Yeah, just I think a quick response to, because a lot of it would sharing some good thinking. Yes, we have spoken with and have been in conversations with the various property and business owners in what could become the overlay. Yeah, and you know, and in some instances, you know, they're interested in the idea of potentially selling and moving their business. And in those instances, we're working with them to try to find them alternative places in Beverly. You know, there are other commercial industrial zones in the community, and that's not a guarantee that it'll work, but you know, but we are interested in, you know, if that were to come to pass with any given property owner, to try to keep them in town if they want to stay in town. Yeah.
Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Boudreau. I live on Western Ave, but I'm also the commissioner of Beverly Women's Softball League. We have 150 women who play at Innisetti every Thursday night all summer long. And I know that there's a couple hundred people between McPherson and Innisetti every night in the summer. And we're so lucky to have those fields and those lights and be able to be there. So many of my friends in other cities are like, wow, you have a place that adults can go and do something. People are very concerned about the parking, about losing that space, about having the light restriction and the noise restriction be earlier because it'll be changed to residential from commercial. So there's a big question from a lot of people I know about that. Also, the boat ramp. It's like the only boat ramp in Beverly. Like, is something going to be done to make sure people have access to that? So the big questions are, what are we doing to make sure that there's parking and availability for Innisetti and McPherson? Because those are very important places for a lot of families. And what are we doing to make sure that we can have a boat ramp in Beverly that people can use?
Thanks, Carrie. So let me think. You've got, you know, first we're talking about a parcel that's vacant, that even when Bolomat was still there, I think we all benefited from being able to park on their property in addition along the city street. And so, you know, if something ends up being built there, we've talked with the folks who own it to say, look, if this happens, you're going to have to provide meaningful parking opportunity for the public. on the parcel, because that's been the dynamic all this time. Now, this may not happen, right? It may not get developed. Today, it can't be, right? So I think, and whatever does or doesn't happen there may be in the future an opportunity and a need for some thoughtfulness about how many cars come down there, and carpooling and such. We only own, we, the public, the city, only owns so much down there. But, I mean, you've been at both meetings here, and I want to make sure that we kind of have an ongoing conversation with you. And I know some of your fellow players are right there looking at me with the same, I mean, look, it's a great space. You have a great time down there. We want to make sure you keep doing so. And I'm sensitive to what you raise about, if residential comes in, are they going to start complaining about the noise? I get that. I remember in Salem when that laundry building next to Roosevelt's was redone. As soon as people moved in, they wanted to shut down the live music at Roosevelt's. I get it. And, so we wouldn't want to see that happen. We'll have to talk through how to protect your ability to play and enjoy it out there. And on the boat ramp, you asked about that. I mean, that's been a privately owned boat ramp for however many years. It's got the potential that with a redevelopment that may happen there, that through the Chapter 91 process at the state level, it becomes much more available to the public. So, we'll see. Again, these are still conditionals, right? They're not definitely going to happen. So I'd say let's keep a conversation going with you and the league.
Okay, so that was everyone who signed up. Is there anyone here that may still want to speak? Anyone here? Stephen, please. Why not? You ask. You're part of the community. I like you. All right, well, make sure you use the microphone so that BevCam can hear you also.
Thank you. I really have a bunch of different points that I wanted to go back over. You talked about zoning is an allowed right. And changing the zoning in this area it's not a right, it's something that the city is going to be giving up to the owners of the property and making their property more attractive to development. It's really going to allow greater development, greater density. That's what the zoning changing is going to allow. When the mayor talked about our population went from 40,000 in 1970, when I was just a teenager, to 42,000 today, and you say, well, gee, that's not a lot. That didn't grow much. But between then and now, if you look at what we've added in this city, Cumming Center, there's a lot of traffic that comes from the Cumming Center. Brimble Ave, the industrial park back there, there's a lot of traffic now that comes from that area. Cherry Hill, which doesn't affect this side that much, but it still affects that intersection area. We can do all the traffic studies we want to do, and we can get them to say whatever we want them to say. But the one thing that doesn't lie are these two things right here. They're called eyeballs. Look at it. This is your traffic study. Look what's going on out there. You can see it. It doesn't lie to you. People lie. The eyeballs don't. The state's community rezoning thing, okay? Horrible, horrible, horrible. For the state or the federal government to come into our community and say, you have to change your zoning to meet their requirements. It's our city. It's our property. It's our right. And we as a community should be able to decide how our city is zoned. We shouldn't let outside, I mean, granted, okay, so if you don't meet it, they're not going to give you money. You know what? As a community, you have to stand up and say, you know what? We control our homes, our lives. I don't want to be in LA. I don't want to sit in traffic all day long. If I did, I'd move to LA. Right? A lot of the developers too, when they build a development, when they get it to about 70% occupied, what do? They sell it. That's how they make their money. They build it, develop it to 70%, and sell it away as a cash cow. That's what developers do. I'm in the construction industry. I've been in this since '85. I've been in the development side. And my final thought is, well, I have two final thoughts. Do I really? Net zero. Yeah, we'd love to hit net zero. But by trying to push net zero on everything, do you know what it does? It increases the living daylights out of the cost of everything that we do. So it makes building products more expensive. It makes the home that you're trying to live in more expensive so that you can't afford to live there. So the more we try and push, the more green stuff, and I'm not saying we don't need green. We do, but there needs to be a balance between what we're pushing and affordability. There's got to be a give and take here. I don't think that we should just push and go for net zero everything when we can't afford to build on a net zero basis. Expensive wise, for anybody that wants to move into our community, it's just not going to happen. It's just too expensive. One point I'll make is that a breaker in your circuit panel on your house, okay? Years ago it was $2.25. They changed the law to arc fault, and that same breaker went to $40. So your panel went from $300 to $2,000 just for the materials. So that's, and they'll tell you, arc fault saves lives, but that's an algorithm that they all talk about, which nobody can explain, which I can't explain any of these algorithms. As a community, these guys all work for us. We pay their salary. We pay for their insurance, their buildings, all that. We should have a right to be able to say what we want as a community. And it shouldn't be a small part of the community that decides what we want. It should be the majority of the community that decides what we want. And if the majority of the community wants a certain thing, then these folks should live up to that commitment that they were voted in to represent us, the community. And as we decide what we want, they should represent us in that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Steve. Okay.
Hi, I'm Susan Feeney. I live on Roderick Avenue, and I only moved here about 5 years ago, and I've really come to enjoy the area, the neighborhood, the camaraderie, and a couple of things. One thing I want to affirm what Eric said about the traffic getting to 128. 1 week ago, it took me 29 minutes to get to 128. 29 minutes. Less than that to get to Waltham.
What time?
4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, yeah. Okay. And then the second thing is, you talk about the Bass River overlay. Now, I am not skilled in any of this, okay? My expertise is healthcare. So it makes me wonder, you're talking about a Bass River overlay, but I'm not hearing about any impact on the Bass River. I I do recall, I could have the numbers wrong, about 2 years ago, you probably know this, Eric. About 2 years ago, they were going, yeah, better than me. We're going to dredge part of.
I'm just paraphrasing, so they'd be better off answering. Maybe Mr. Mayor or Scott, if you want to.
So what it was, as I recall, was that we were going to pay all sorts of money to have the river dredged, okay? And then, I could be remembering this incorrectly, but then I recall that the equipment came in, they were going to do the dredging, and found out that there was contamination, and they could not then take that, what they were dredging, and dump it in the ocean. And we ended up paying that company something like $500,000. So what, if you're talking about Bass River overlay, what impact is all this going to have on the Bass River? And how are we going to fix it? Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Two entirely different things. So, some of you have heard me explain all this. The city has been working to try to get the Bass River dredge for about 15 years. Maybe not quite that, but a while. And the EPA, Federal Environmental Protection Agency, and the Army Corps of Engineers looked at sediment sampling when the city filed an application for approval to dredge. And this was probably 2015 or so. They both the EPA and the Army Corps said they made a determination of suitability, that the dredge sediment could be disposed of at one of the open ocean dump sites. And what that means is you take a barge out, you dump it over, it settles to the bottom. So the city, relying on the permit that was awarded by the Army Corps of Engineers, then applied to the state for a dredging grant. The state approved the grant. The state said, we'll give you $1.4 million. You, the city, put up $1.5 million, and we're going to dredge the river from maybe the Hall-Whitaker Bridge, maybe a little bit upriver of it, depending on how far the money went, down to the mouth of the river. So relying on that permit, we got state money. We went out for bid. Somebody responded. We awarded the bid. So a dredging company we signed a contract with, they came to Beverly. And as they got to Beverly to, quote, mobilize, and they needed to get here because the dredging season is fairly brief. It's like November through February. All of a sudden, the people at the Army Corps of Engineers wouldn't answer their phone calls. They were calling to say, please give us the dumping coordinates so we know where to take things and put them out in the open ocean dump site. Army Corps wasn't returning calls, so I ended up calling the regional director, and we met with him, and he ended up saying, we're really sorry, somebody screwed up. When they called us to get the coordinates, we had an analyst just do a double check on the permit, and the analyst said, oh my Lord, who approved this permit? This sediment can't be dumped out at sea, it's not clean enough, it's contaminated. So, so that started a saga of us being involved with the state and the Army Corps, and the consultants we had hired who ended up, because they were our experts, and they really let the city down. So we ended up in this process that went close to, well, the dredging company. They sued us to get their money. We ended up settling with them because there was no fault here. The Army Corps is federal agency. We've looked hard at trying to get them to help. We've had the Congressman's office and the 2 U.S. senators from Massachusetts, and we're still working with them. And the Army Corps said, always verbally, we're really sorry. And oh, by the way, we don't have a line item to help make you whole. Well, the state's been a great partner, and the state agreed to share half of the cost of any settlement. We ended up settling. The state shared in half the cost, but the consultants who we hired, they ended up paying some of the cost as well. And so there it sits, and at present, Senator Warren, Senator Markey, Congressman Moulton are working with us to try to help get us a significant federal earmark to create a CAD cell, which is an acronym for going under the floor of the ocean and pulling out clean fill and taking the contaminated fill and putting it under the floor of the ocean and capping it. And so it's still going to be a multi-year project, and we're hoping we'll be able to get the river, at least the lower half of the river dredged eventually. So that's some of the behind the scenes, what's going on with all that. It's been hard. It's been a hard road to travel, and thankfully, as I said, the state's been a great partner, and our federal elected officials are working hard to help us with it.
Michael? I just want to remind, 8:30 we'll do a hard stop. So if you have, so did you want to have a follow-up?
I don't think that, I thought I asked a question about the Bass River overlay and what impact that, what will that impact that, what impact will that have on the river?
It won't, it's land side. It's
My
the
question
land
may
adjacent
help
to the
with
river. I'm not sure how to answer your question. It's the land adjacent to the river. I'm not sure. There's no impact on the river itself. I can follow up with you, Susan. I'm not sure I understand the question. Thanks.
Michael?
Mike Reynolds, East Garfield Avenue. My question is, the property that's on the overlay district, as it sits now, is fairly contaminated. It's my understanding it's the same contamination that's in the river. All right, Mayor's shaking his head no. No. Okay.
I'll give you a little more detail.
Okay. What is the plan to remove the contamination before any development's done?
So if we eventually pass an overlay, it's all still private property. If somebody looks to develop it, that's between them and the environmental agencies at the state and federal level. So any cleanup that would need to be done would be done at that point. To your point about what's in the river and what's, there are various contaminants in the sediment of the channel of the river. And that's I think it's largely a result of a couple hundred years of industrialization along the riverbanks and upriver. And we know that Grid, for example, has contamination on their own land and in the river adjacent to their property, not out in the channel. That's a function of the activities they conducted on there for years. So there are a number of different things that that over time contributed to those contaminants in the sediment. But to your question about who cleans up when, National Grid, for their part on the water side of their property, they were required to begin their cleanup when we began our dredging. And now that that's on hold, they don't need to do that quite yet. For anybody who would redevelop a property on that riverbank, it's between them and the environmental agencies at a point that they would look to redevelop.
Does anyone in the city government know what is in the ground there? Are you aware of any of the contaminants?
You mean on the bank, on the...
Where Desmond's property is, what was on National Grid's property that they've capped with asphalt and driven sheet pile in to keep it from leaching out? Who knows what's there?
Sure. When you look back at what they had on there, right? I think oil is one of them. I'm not sure what other chemicals, other materials they had on there. Why don't I follow up with you and I can come back with an answer on that? Because, for example, Commissioner Collins, he's got a institutional knowledge and a historical knowledge of some of those parcels that I don't have.
Okay. I know the Desmond's property itself has 17 monitoring wells on it. Mm-hmm. So that can't be good.
Yeah.
They don't monitor for happiness. So that's my concern.
Yeah.
If this all has to get excavated and trucked out, it's going by my house. That's my concern. So I'd like to know what's in the ground there before anything's even considered. I think we're jumping the shark, so to speak. Okay?
Well,
Do you think that's a valid concern?
They could be developed now under what's allowed in the zoning currently. I'd say this, we can try to get some answers on that, absolutely. In addition to that, a couple people mentioned the Sedna apartments earlier that were on the old Morton Thiokol property. Well, that was a cleanup site several times over.
But that was super fun, correct?
Was it?
Yes.
And so there was a fair amount of removal from that site, and there are guidelines and requirements for how those sediments get transported. So, we'd have to remember that. But let's follow up, Mike. We can look into some of what's there and have a better understanding of it. Okay, thanks.
Ken Smith, Linden Avenue. I just want to dwell a bit more on dredging the river, in that in your description of that, I think you omitted an important part, specifically the contract that was never executed. I believe omitted any dredging in that portion of the channel next to National Grid. Assuming I'm correct about that, I'd like to know what the eventual plan is to deal with it.
Can you repeat the question just a little to the microphone, Bez? It was hard
I
to
believe the contract for dredging in the Bass River, the contract that was never executed, did not call for dredging of the channel in that portion of the river immediately adjacent to National Grid. Assuming I'm correct about that, what is the eventual plan for dealing with it?
Well, I'm going to have to follow up with you, and also, everything's on hold since we're not able to dredge yet. We will need a site where we'll need a site that can accept the sediment before we can go back to looking at dredging.
Assuming I'm correct about the original contract, why was it not part of the original contract?
No, I understand your question. I'm going to have to follow up with you because it's not, I'm not sure that I follow it entirely.
Can you ask what you want me to elaborate?
To dredge the river from the Hallwaker Bridge down to the mouth of the river.
I believe that's an incorrect statement, sir.
Okay, let's follow up. Let's follow up. Appreciate it. I will say, I really appreciate all the thinking and all the input on things that are, directly on point to the potential for redevelopment on land and the other things that are coming in. We had outside legal counsel on the dredging because we needed that. We'd never been involved in a dredging case before. And the question just raised about the contract, we'll definitely follow up and share what we're able to on that.
So it is close to 8:30. Any last thoughts? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Holly. I live on Roderick Ave. So my question is a few changes to residential. We have all these new people coming in, as well as where the press box in Casa de Luca was, they also have this. You said National Grid keeps doing the gas lines over, causing detours and details. So with all these people, we have to increase the population for students. So my question is, how are the taxpayers gonna pay more for for more police to do details, more teachers to teach the students that are coming in.
Any private detail work, which is what National Grid's gas main replacement work is, that's paid for by the company. It's actually paid for by us. If we have gas in our homes, it's ratepayers, but it's not paid for through the city budget. As for kids, we've done 3 studies. I say studies. We've done 3 surveys where we work with the school department and we give them the addresses of the several multifamily redevelopments that have happened in the last several years downtown. And they look at those addresses and they run them against their enrollments, and it gives us a count of how many Beverly Public School students are coming with these buildings. And it's always been in the range of 1 student for every 30 to 34 or so units of housing. The 1 and 2 bedroom model in the downtown like that isn't bringing a significant number of kids.
Mr. Mayor, how are you going to take care of all the kids in another school that you just built? You already have a problem in that first school you just built.
I didn't build it.
Not you, so okay.
If I was that talented. We built the middle school. It was built for 1,400 kids, except that's an 80% occupancy number. It's really built for closer to 1,600 kids. And the state really is tight about how many square feet they let you build, right? And we fought them on that. And initially they were giving us 100 count fewer student, and we fought and got them to bump it up 100. But the point being is that the school is built to accommodate more kids than are in it today. So, we're in good position there. If you look at our enrollments, we've been averaging the last several years in new first grades, kindergarten and first grades, we've been averaging in the 350 to 375 range for kids, and that's about on point with what we'd expect in the middle school. This particular incoming kindergarten class is trending smaller than the average. Every so often, you don't know how to explain it, but you get a smaller, sometimes you get a larger number of kids. But we track it, and as I said, this particular type of development isn't a big contributor to the school numbers.
It is 8:30 as promised. I want to thank everyone for coming again. Just want everyone to realize that this conversation hasn't ended. I mean, obviously, back about a month and a half or so ago, everyone was here with concerns, seeing the project was being done quickly. I was hearing, it's a done deal, And I assured for me, I know it wasn't a done deal because nothing was in front of me yet. And I think I've been pretty straightforward, honest with people when they came conversation to tell them where I stood. We're still at that process right now, so it isn't a done deal. I know people have, they're suspect because of past practices, whatever they think or whatever they perceive. But I can promise you that there isn't anything in front of us. It is an ongoing conversation. I assure you that we will continue having sort of meetings where it needs to be. If there's a meeting that needs to be here in the future, we will have another meeting. I'm sure Eric will be happy to spearhead it and get it going forward. If it has to be at the high school because there's a large crowd throughout the whole community, it's not the end of the conversation. I can promise you that. So again, I want to thank everyone for showing up. I thank for everyone who has called me, who's had many conversations with me. I have heard everyone from everywhere, from those who want to have something built to the concerns of traffic and the density and the height of the building and the fact that we're losing the bowl mat. I've heard it. My fellow councilors have heard it. We're the ones who vote. I know we all look at it and think that the mayor is doing it and this is what's going to be done, but the mayor presents us with a plan and it's us, the councilors, who vote, and we represent you guys. That's our job, as well as the mayor represents you. So we are hearing you. I know my fellow councilors are hearing you as well, so please be reassured that we are doing our due diligence as well, and don't stop asking the questions, don't stop calling me. If you want to call some of the at-large councilors because you don't like my answer, feel free to call them as well. Trust me, I know I don't have all the answers, but please don't stop asking the questions and giving your concerns, because that's the only way we're going to go forward with this, whether it does come to fruition or not. So I can just, again, I can't reiterate it enough. It's not a done deal. We're still working toward it. The mayor has heard you. We've had the second meeting. You've seen how it's changed. So I'm going to leave it with that. I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Drive home safely or walk safely. Want to make sure you're awake.